For 11 nights, she poured coffee for a billionaire without ever knowing his name. At 11:43 on a cold Tuesday night, Megan Foster moved through the nearly empty Chicago diner with the tired rhythm of someone who had already been on her feet for 9 hours. The fluorescent lights hummed above the counter. A coffee machine hissed behind her. Outside, the sidewalk shone from an earlier rain, and traffic had thinned to an occasional pair of headlights passing beneath the street lamps. In the booth near the back sat the same man who had appeared almost every night for nearly 2 weeks. Dark coat, clean white shirt, black coffee, no sugar. Megan had never asked much about him because she had learned not to build stories around strangers. Some customers wanted conversation. Others wanted silence. He seemed to prefer silence. "Refill?" she asked, lifting the pot. The man looked up from the plain notebook beside his cup. He had calm gray-blue eyes and the kind of composed expression Megan associated with people who rarely had to repeat themselves. "Please." She filled the mug. "You are becoming predictable." A faint smile crossed his face. "Is that bad?" "Not when predictable tips." She moved away before he could answer. His name was Ryan Caldwell. He was 37 years old, founder and chief executive officer of Caldwell Hospitality Group, and wealthy enough that business magazines occasionally printed photographs of him beside numbers Megan could not imagine spending in 10 lifetimes. None of that mattered inside the diner because Megan had never seen those magazines. To her, Ryan was simply the quiet man in the last booth. That was exactly why he kept returning. Near midnight, an older customer approached the register and emptied his pockets onto the counter. "A few bills. Some coins. Still not enough." "I thought I had more," he said, embarrassed. The night manager glanced at the check. "Then you should have checked before ordering." Megan looked at the man, then at the untouched pie box he had asked to take home. "He is short $6.40, she said. "That is not our problem," the manager replied. Megan reached into the tip jar beneath the register and counted out the difference. "Now he is not short." The manager stared at her. "You are paying for him?" "Yes. That comes out of your tips." Megan closed the register. "I know." The older man thanked her quietly before leaving with his food. From the back booth, Ryan had watched every second. Megan returned with the coffee pot, as if nothing unusual had happened. "You did not have to do that," he said. She shrugged. He was hungry. "You do that often?" "Only when people need it." Ryan studied her. "What if helping someone costs you something you cannot afford?" Megan glanced toward the tip jar, then back at him. "Then I guess I have $6.40 less tonight." She turned to leave, but Ryan spoke again. "Why?" Megan stopped. For the first time in 11 nights, she looked at him long enough to really see his face. "Because he was hungry," she said, "and I could not pretend I did not notice." Then she walked away. Ryan remained still, one hand wrapped around the coffee mug. He had spent years surrounded by people who noticed his watch, his company, his last name, his money. Megan Foster had noticed none of those things. But on the 12th night, she had shown him something he had almost stopped believing was real. The next evening, Ryan arrived at the diner 20 minutes later than usual, wearing the same dark coat and carrying the same plain notebook beneath his arm. Megan was balancing 3 coffee mugs in one hand when she noticed him take his usual booth, but she only gave him a quick nod before turning toward another table. That small gesture made him smile. In most places, people noticed Ryan Caldwell before he even entered the room. Hotel managers straightened their jackets. Investors checked their watches. Employees lowered their voices. Here, Megan treated him exactly the way she treated the truck driver near the window and the retired teacher who ordered soup every Thursday. Ryan had first walked into the diner for a completely different reason. Caldwell Hospitality Group was negotiating to purchase nearly an entire commercial block on the north side, including the aging diner and several neighboring storefronts. His board wanted to replace the properties with a luxury hotel, conference center, and retail complex. On paper, the numbers were excellent. The location had strong traffic, rising property values, and easy access to downtown. Ryan had reviewed every spreadsheet. Still, something bothered him. Reports described the area in percentages and projected revenue, but none of them described the people who actually worked there. So Ryan had started visiting without telling his executive team. He wanted to see the neighborhood when nobody knew the owner of Caldwell Hospitality was watching. The first night, he expected to stay 20 minutes. Megan poured his coffee, called him sir, and disappeared into the kitchen. She did not recognize him. The second night, she remembered his order. By the fifth, she stopped asking whether he wanted cream. By the 10th, Ryan realized he was no longer coming only because of the acquisition. He liked sitting somewhere his last name meant nothing. Megan approached his booth and placed a slice of apple pie beside his coffee. I did not order this. Kitchen made one too many. And you chose me? Do not get excited. Table for already left. Ryan laughed softly. Megan glanced at his notebook. You always writing something important? Mostly observations. About what? He looked around the diner. How places work. Megan raised an eyebrow. That sounds mysterious. I work around hotels. It was technically true. Management? She asked. Ryan hesitated. Something like that. Megan nodded as if the answer barely interested her. Well, if you ever manage one, remember the people cleaning the rooms know more about the place than the people sitting in offices. Ryan looked at her. Why do you say that? Because the people doing the work usually see problems first. She picked up the empty sugar container from the table. Management usually sees them after somebody complains. Then she walked away. Ryan opened his notebook and wrote the sentence down. Outside, a black sedan waited 2 blocks away where Megan could not see it. His assistant had already sent 3 messages about the acquisition meeting scheduled for morning. Ryan ignored them for another 10 minutes. He watched Megan wipe down the counter, refill a stranger's coffee, and laugh at something the cook said through the service window. Nobody inside the diner knew that Ryan could buy the entire building before breakfast. And for the first time in years, he was beginning to understand why being unknown felt more valuable than being important. : Writing variant equals document ID equals 38147 title equals part 3. 2 nights later, Ryan walked into the diner carrying a problem he had never expected to have. He had left his wallet in the back seat of the sedan parked 2 blocks away. He realized it only after Megan placed his usual black coffee and a plate of eggs in front of him. You look distracted, she said. Ryan checked his coat pocket again. Nothing. I forgot my wallet. Megan glanced toward the register. That is unfortunate timing. I can get it. He reached for his phone, already thinking about calling his driver, but Megan picked up the check before he could. It is $12.18. Megan, I can pay. Tomorrow. She walked toward the register. Ryan followed her with his eyes as she opened the tip jar, counted out several bills and coins, then rang up his meal as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. When she returned, Ryan stared at the receipt in her hand. You just paid for my dinner. I noticed. Why? Megan slid the receipt across the table. Because you come in here almost every night, you never cause trouble, and you always tip. That is your standard for financial assistance. Do not make it sound dramatic. It is $12. Ryan leaned back. $12 meant almost nothing to him. His hotel spent more than that replacing a single broken wine glass. But Megan had taken the money from a tip jar that actually mattered to her. What if I never pay you back? He asked. Megan folded her arms. Then I lose $12. And that does not bother you? I have survived worse. Her answer was light, but something in her eyes changed for half a second. Ryan noticed. What does that mean? Megan looked toward the counter where the manager was sorting receipts. It means rent is still due whether customers tip well or not. She picked up his empty coffee mug. That is life. Ryan wanted to ask more, but she had already turned away. 10 minutes later, during her break, Megan stepped into the hallway near the kitchen and answered a phone call. Ryan could not hear every word, but he caught enough. I understand, she whispered. I just need another month. A pause. No, please do not start anything yet. That house was my mother's. Ryan looked down at the table. When Megan returned, her face was composed again. Everything all right? He asked. Fine. You do not sound fine. She gave him a tired smile. Good thing you are not my therapist. Ryan almost told her then. He could have said his full name. He could have explained the hotels, the acquisition, the fact that $12 was less than he spent on parking during a morning meeting. Instead, he stayed quiet. Megan tore the bottom portion from his receipt and handed it to him. Proof of debt. Ryan folded the small piece of paper once, then again, and slipped it carefully into his wallet after his driver quietly delivered it to him outside. Before leaving, he returned to the counter and placed $12 beside Megan's tip jar. She pushed it back toward him. Tomorrow means tomorrow. Ryan smiled and took the money. For the first time in years, someone had trusted him without knowing his name, his company, or his bank account. And as he walked into the cold Chicago night, the $12 receipt in his pocket suddenly felt more valuable than in colon. By the end of that week, Ryan knew two things he had never expected to care about when he first walked into the diner. The first was that Megan Foster was in danger of losing the small house her mother had left behind. The second was that he had begun looking forward to hearing her voice more than he looked forward to closing any deal on his calendar. He returned the $12 exactly when he had promised, placing the money on the counter beneath the folded receipt. Megan counted it, raised an eyebrow, and said, "Good. Now your credit rating with me is restored." Ryan smiled. "I was worried. You should be. My interest rates are terrible." She walked away before she could see how long he kept smiling. Over the next several nights, their conversations grew longer. Not personal enough to feel dangerous, but no longer casual. Megan told him her mother had worked 2 jobs to buy the little 2-bedroom house outside the city. After her mother died, unpaid taxes, repairs, and an old loan had slowly turned the house into something Megan was struggling to keep. "Why not sell it?" Ryan asked carefully. Megan wiped the counter with a towel. "Because not everything has to make financial sense." Ryan looked at her. "That sounds expensive." "It is." She smiled faintly. "But it is the last place where I can still walk into the kitchen and remember exactly where she used to stand." Ryan had no answer to that. The next morning, he sat at the head of a polished conference table while his executives discussed projected revenue from the proposed hotel development. A map of the neighborhood appeared on the screen. The diner was marked for acquisition. So were the pharmacy, the laundromat, and several small storefronts Megan passed every night after work. "We can move quickly once the property agreements are signed," Daniel Mercer said. Ryan stared at the map longer than anyone expected. "What happens to the current tenants?" A vice president glanced at his notes. "Standard relocation terms." "And the employees?" "That would be up to the individual businesses before closing." Ryan leaned back. 2 weeks earlier, that answer would have been enough. Now he pictured Megan counting tips beneath fluorescent lights and paying $6.40 so a stranger could take dinner home. "I want a full impact review before we finalize anything," he said. Several people exchanged surprised looks. That night, Ryan nearly told Megan the truth. She was refilling his coffee when she joked, "You ask a lot of questions for a guy who supposedly works around hotels." He looked at her and felt the confession rising to his throat. He could tell her his name. He could explain the development, the diner, all of it. Instead, Megan sat across from him during her break and pushed half a slice of pie toward his side of the table. "You always look like you are thinking about work," she said. "Tonight you are not allowed." Ryan glanced at the pie. "Is that an order?" "Yes." "You know I might be terrible at taking orders." "Then you probably should not work in hospitality." He laughed. She did too. And that was the moment Ryan understood why he stayed silent. It was no longer because he wanted to observe the neighborhood unnoticed. It was because Megan was speaking to him as Ryan, just Ryan, and he was afraid that the second she learned the truth, every easy conversation between them would disappear. : Writing variant equals document ID equals 6152 for title equals part 5. 3 nights later, the diner felt different before Megan even knew why. A man in a charcoal suit stood near the register speaking quietly with her manager, pointing toward tables, employees, and the kitchen as if everything around him were being measured. Ryan recognized him immediately. Charles Benton, Regional Development Director for Caldwell Hospitality Group. Ryan had approved the neighborhood review, but he had not expected Benton to conduct it personally, and certainly not while Ryan was sitting unnoticed in the back booth. Megan approached with the coffee pot. "Your usual?" Ryan nodded, but his attention stayed on Benton. "Who is the suit?" Megan asked quietly. "No idea," Ryan lied, and the words felt heavier than they should have. Near midnight, an exhausted man entered wearing a faded work jacket and asked whether the kitchen was still open. Megan seated him near the counter and brought him soup, bread, and coffee. When the check came, he counted his cash twice and realized he was several dollars short. "I can leave the coffee," he said, embarrassed. Megan shook her head. "You already drank it." She reached toward her tip jar. Benton noticed. "What are you doing?" Megan looked up. "Covering the difference." Benton frowned. "That is not appropriate. He is short $5. That is not the issue." Benton glanced around the dining room. Businesses like this need standards. Customers notice who is allowed to sit here. Megan became very still. He is a customer. He cannot pay his bill. He can pay almost all of it. Benton lowered his voice. Your manager has already been warned about presentation. We are evaluating whether this location fits the direction of the property. Megan looked toward her manager. The man avoided her eyes. Ryan felt his stomach tighten. He could end this with one sentence. He could stand, say his name, and Benton would immediately change his tone. But that would also expose everything. The acquisition. The hotel plans. Every night Ryan had sat there pretending to be ordinary. Megan placed $5 beside the register. His bill is paid. Benton stared at her. Take the money back. No. Then you are refusing a direct instruction. Megan glanced at the customer, who looked uncomfortable enough to disappear into the floor. She softened her voice. Sir, finish your coffee. You are fine. Benton turned to the manager. Handle this. The manager swallowed. Megan, maybe you should clock out. She looked at him. For tonight. Silence answered her. You are firing me? I am sorry. Ryan stood halfway from his booth. This was the moment. He knew it. One word would stop everything. But fear arrived before courage. If Megan learned who he was now, she would know he had been watching her while his company evaluated the place. She would know every conversation had happened beneath a truth he had chosen not to share. Ryan hesitated. Only a few seconds. It was enough. Megan untied her apron, folded it carefully, and placed it on the counter. She did not cry. She did not argue. She simply looked at the manager and said, I hope $5 was worth losing someone who cared about this place. Then she walked toward the door. As she passed Ryan, she managed a tired smile. Guess your coffee is going to need a new waitress. The bell above the door rang softly behind her. Ryan remained standing beside his booth, watching through the glass as Megan stepped into the cold Chicago night, carrying nothing but her purse and the coat she had worn to work. For the first time, being unknown did not Ryan was outside before Megan reached the corner. The cold air had sharpened, and a thin wind pushed loose paper along the sidewalk as she pulled her coat tighter around herself. Megan. She stopped, but did not turn immediately. When she finally looked back, Ryan was standing several feet away, breathing harder than he expected from the short distance. You did not have to follow me, she said. I know. Then why did you? Ryan searched for an answer that did not require the truth he had been avoiding. Because you should not have lost your job over $5. Megan gave a tired laugh. Apparently I should have. That was not right. No, it was not. She looked down the street toward the bus stop. But right does not pay rent. Ryan stepped closer. Let me help. Her expression changed immediately. With what? He hesitated. Money. A few weeks until you find something else. Megan stared at him. No. You do not even know how much I mean. It does not matter. Megan. Ryan, I am serious. She folded her arms. You told me you work around hotels. I have no idea what you make, but you do not need to spend it on me. The irony landed so hard that Ryan almost looked away. She thought she was protecting him. I can afford it, he said quietly. That is not the point. Megan shook her head. Do not waste your money on me. Save it for yourself. Ryan felt the $12 receipt inside his coat pocket as if it had suddenly gained weight. This woman had paid for his dinner, defended strangers, and just lost her job, yet she was still worried about what helping her might cost him. Then what do you need? He asked. Megan looked at him for a long moment. Work. Her voice was calm now. Not rescue. Not somebody feeling sorry for me. I need a job. Ryan nodded slowly. What kind? Anything I am qualified for. Front desk. Guest services. Restaurant work. I can handle people, schedules, complaints, inventory. I have done a little of everything. Ryan almost smiled. She had no idea how closely that answer matched a position his company was struggling to fill. There is a hotel downtown, he said. Caldwell Grand. Megan frowned slightly. That expensive place near the river? Yes. You know someone there? Ryan paused half a second too long. I know a man named Daniel Mercer. Manager. Something like that. Megan gave him a suspicious look. You say that a lot. Go there tomorrow morning at 9. Ryan continued before she could refuse. Ask for Daniel Mercer. Tell him Ryan sent you. And what is he going to do? Give you an interview. An actual interview? Yes. Not a favor. Ryan swallowed. An opportunity. Megan studied his face, trying to decide whether to trust him. You are being weirdly confident about this. Daniel owes me a conversation. That was not exactly a lie, though it felt dangerously close to one. Megan glanced toward the approaching bus. Fine. 9 tomorrow. Promise. She gave him a faint smile. You already know how I feel about debts. The bus pulled to the curb. Megan stepped toward the door, then looked back. Thank you, Ryan. He nodded, unable to say what he really wanted to say. She climbed aboard, still believing he was simply a man who worked around hotels. Ryan watched the bus disappear into the traffic before taking out his phone. Daniel answered on the second ring. Ryan, I need you at the Caldwell Grand at 9 tomorrow morning. For what? Ryan looked toward the diner behind him. For someone who deserves a fair chance. He ended the call, knowing that by tomorrow, hiding who he was would no longer be possible. : Writing variant equals document ID equals 54721 title equals part 7. At 9 the next morning, Megan stepped through the revolving doors of the Caldwell Grand Hotel and immediately wondered whether she had made a mistake. The lobby rose 3 stories above her, filled with polished stone, brass fixtures, and tall windows overlooking the Chicago River. Guests moved past with rolling luggage while employees in tailored uniforms greeted them by name. Megan glanced down at her simple black slacks and cream blouse, suddenly aware that the most expensive place she had ever worked served coffee in chipped ceramic mugs. She approached the front desk. I am here to see Daniel Mercer. Ryan told me to ask for him. The receptionist looked up. Your name? Megan Foster. Something changed in the woman's expression. Of course. Mr. Mercer is expecting you. Megan was escorted toward a private elevator. That made no sense. She had expected a manager's office behind the front desk, not an executive floor requiring a security badge. When the elevator doors opened, Megan stepped into a quiet hallway lined with glass offices and framed photographs of luxury hotels around the world. At the far end stood Daniel Mercer in a charcoal suit. Beside him was Ryan. Megan stopped. For half a second, relief crossed her face. You came too. Ryan did not answer immediately. He was wearing a tailored navy suit she had never seen before, his dark coat replaced by the kind of clothing that seemed made for the room around him. 2 executives stood beside him holding folders. Megan looked from Ryan to Daniel. What is going on? Before Ryan could speak, an assistant approached with several documents. Mr. Caldwell, the acquisition agreements are ready for your review. Megan's eyes moved slowly back to Ryan. Silence filled the hallway. Mr. Caldwell, she repeated. Ryan took 1 step toward her. Megan, I can explain. She looked at the wall behind him. A framed company photograph showed Ryan standing in front of the same hotel beneath the words Caldwell Hospitality Group, founder and chief executive officer. Her face went pale. You own this place? Yes. You told me you worked around hotels. I do. Megan gave a short, disbelieving laugh. That was your idea of the truth? I should have told you sooner. Her eyes narrowed. What else did you not tell me? Ryan hesitated. That hesitation answered before he did. Megan looked toward the folder in the assistant's hands. The diner. Ryan's expression changed. Megan, your company is buying it. The acquisition is still under review. She stared at him. The conversations returned all at once. His questions about management, the neighborhood, the employees, the man in the charcoal suit who had been evaluating them. Then the moment she had been fired while Ryan sat only a few booths away. You knew who that man was. Ryan lowered his voice. Yes. Megan stepped back. You could have stopped him. I should have. But you did not. Ryan had no defense that did not sound like another excuse. Megan looked around at the executive floor, the expensive suits, the company photographs, everything that had been hidden behind black coffee and a dark coat. I thought you were sitting there because you understood what it felt like to be overlooked. Her voice broke slightly, but she steadied it. You were sitting there because you owned the room. That is not why I kept coming back. Maybe not. Megan met his eyes. But when it mattered, you had the power to speak, and you chose silence. She turned toward the elevator. Ryan followed 1 step, then stopped himself. For weeks, he had been afraid the truth would make Megan see him differently. Now he understood that being a billionaire was never the betrayal. Letting her stand alone when he could have helped. For 3 days after Megan walked out of the Caldwell Grand, Ryan did not call her. He wanted to. He opened her contact more than once, stared at her name, then locked his phone again. For the first time, He understood that an apology delivered too quickly could become another form of pressure. Instead, he went to work. Charles Benton was removed from the neighborhood review, while Caldwell Hospitality opened a formal investigation into the employment standards used during the acquisition process. Ryan ordered the purchase of the diner block paused until every tenant and employee impact report had been completed. More importantly, he introduced a company-wide policy requiring clear protections against treating customers differently because of appearance or perceived income. Daniel watched him sign the final document. You know the board is going to ask why this suddenly matters so much. Ryan closed the folder. It should have mattered before Megan had to teach me. The next afternoon, Ryan sent her one message. No excuses. No flowers. No money. You were right. I had the power to speak, and I stayed quiet. I am sorry. Megan read it during a break at the temporary catering job she had found through a friend. She did not answer. A week later, Daniel called her. There is an open guest experience position at the Caldwell Grand, he said. Megan nearly hung up. If Ryan asked you to call me, tell him no. He did not. Daniel paused. Actually, he specifically told me he would not be involved if you applied. Megan looked out the kitchen window. Why? Because he finally understands that an opportunity stops being fair when he controls the outcome. She still refused. She was not ready to walk back into Ryan's world simply because he had learned one lesson. 3 weeks passed. The bank sent another notice about her mother's house. Megan worked catering shifts, filled out applications, and kept moving. Then one morning, she opened the Caldwell Hospitality Careers page. The guest experience position was still there. She read every qualification twice. Customer conflict resolution, scheduling, service recovery, staff coordination. Megan slowly realized she had been doing those things for years without anyone giving them impressive names. She submitted the application. No message to Ryan. No special request. 2 interviews followed. Then a practical assessment. Daniel was present for only one of them. Ryan was not. Megan later learned he had removed himself from the hiring process entirely. When the offer came, she sat at her kitchen table staring at the salary for nearly a minute before whispering, I earned this. On her first morning at the Caldwell Grand, she stepped into the lobby wearing a new navy blazer she had bought on sale. Employees hurried past beneath the chandeliers. Guests gathered near the elevators. Across the lobby, Ryan emerged from a meeting and saw her. He stopped. Megan stopped too. For a moment, neither moved. Then Ryan gave her a small professional nod, no different from one he might offer any employee. Megan returned it. He did not approach. He did not claim credit. He simply continued toward the elevators. As the doors closed, Megan realized something had changed. Ryan Caldwell had finally helped her in the one way she had asked from the beginning. He had stepped back and allowed her to prove herself. : Writing variant equals document ID equals 68314 title equals part 9. 8 months later, Megan could walk through the Caldwell Grand lobby without remembering how intimidated she had felt on her first morning. She had earned 2 promotions, helped redesign the guest complaint process, and recently launched an employee support program for workers facing temporary financial hardship. The idea was simple. People worked better when they knew one bad month would not erase years of effort. Ryan had approved the budget only after the proposal passed through the same review process as every other program. By then, Megan trusted that he understood why that mattered. Their relationship had changed slowly. They kept work professional, but outside the hotel they began sharing coffee again, then dinners, then long Sunday walks beside the lake where Ryan wore jeans instead of tailored suits and Megan teased him whenever someone recognized him. He never tried to impress her with expensive restaurants or private cars. Somehow, the quieter choices meant more. One evening after the hotel had nearly emptied, Ryan asked Megan to meet him in the employee lounge. She arrived carrying a folder and found him sitting at a small table with 2 cups of black coffee. You know there is better coffee upstairs, she said. Ryan smiled. This seemed more appropriate. On the table between them rested a small framed piece of paper. Megan stepped closer and laughed when she recognized it. No way. Inside the frame was the faded receipt from the night she had paid for his $12 dinner. You kept this. For 8 months. You are a billionaire who keeps old diner receipts. Apparently. Megan picked up the frame. I thought you lost your wallet. I did. You could have bought the diner. Ryan looked at her. That was never the point. His voice softened. That night was the first time in years someone helped me without knowing what I could give back. Megan set the frame down. I would have helped anyone. I know. Ryan reached into his pocket, but instead of producing jewelry or some extravagant surprise, he placed $12 on the table. Megan stared at the bills. Seriously? I believe this account is overdue. She laughed so hard she had to look away. With interest, you owe me much more than that. I was afraid you would say that. Ryan pushed one coffee toward her. For a moment, they sat quietly, just as they had in the diner before everything became complicated. Megan glanced at the framed receipt again. Beneath it was a small engraved line. Kindness is never beneath leadership. She looked at Ryan. You put that here? For the staff. Not for me. You already knew it. Megan studied his face. The same man she had once known only as black coffee, no sugar. Back then, she had never noticed his watch, his company, or his money. Now she noticed the things that mattered. He listened before answering, stepped back when someone else deserved the room, and used his power differently because he had learned what silence could cost. Megan reached across the table and took his hand. Ryan looked down, then back at her. What? He asked. She smiled. Nothing. I just finally noticed you. This time, Ryan understood exactly what she meant.